Alrighty, so this is our lecture on homeostasis. So we were introduced to this topic in our themes lecture from the cells unit. So just to refresh your memory, remember that homeostasis is about maintaining the internal environment of our bodies. And so we've talked about temperature before, but the main question we want to ask here is how do our bodies, and specifically our cells, know when our internal conditions are changing, and then what do they do about it? So as we just said, the definition of homeostasis is maintaining stable internal conditions within a changing environment. So that means that outside of my body, maybe it's getting really, really cold, but my body temperature doesn't drop. My body temperature stays the same. So how does your body know? How does your body know when it needs to generate a little bit more heat in order to stay warm in cold temperatures, or when it needs to sweat in order to stay cooler in warmer environmental temperatures? The answer is that your cells go through what's called a feedback loop. Okay, and a feedback loop is a mechanism, right? So it's a process or a signal that starts or stops something. So let's think about an example of something you might have in your house. How many of you have central air and have a thermostat for your air conditioner? Okay, so here's a picture of some common thermostats. So how does your house know when they need to click on the heat or when they need to click on the air? Let's think about that. Well, your thermostat has a feedback loop. So the first thing it does is it sort of gets the feel for what's going on in the environment. So part A here is that the temperature of the room has changed in some way. So a stimulus, that's the part A. Stimulus is something that we're going to respond to, okay? So if the temperature of the room changes, that's something that we will respond to. That is the stimulus. Then next is B, okay? There's going to be a sensor that's going to sense that temperature change. So we call that a receptor. Okay, so now we've had a stimulus where the temperature has changed, and now we have something that's told us, hey, the temperature is changing. What are we going to do about it? The control center, meaning inside of your thermostat, is going to make a choice of what to do. So let's say that the temperature is dropping too much, okay? So if the temperature is dropping too much, we're going to need to kick on the heat. So the control center will decide what to do. And then the last part here is the effector. So the effector is going to say, heat, kick on. What results? Heat is produced. And so now the temperature of the room, which was too cold, now gets warmer. Does it get super warm? No. It goes back to that set point, right? It goes back to whatever you set your thermostat at to say this is my room temperature. Like in my house, right now it's fall. So during this time, we have our temperature set at 69 degrees. Okay, so if it starts to get too warm in the house, the air conditioner is going to kick on. Okay, but it's only going to kick on until the temperature drops back down to 69 degrees. Then it will kick off, okay? So what does this look like in our bodies? Well, one thing that we have to regulate is the amount of sugar, okay? So we eat a lot of foods, right? Lots of carbs, macromolecules, and they're made up of glucose monomers. But most often we end up overeating, or we end up not eating enough, or at different times, and our body needs to have a constant supply of glucose moving through your digestive system, getting into your blood, and then going to your cells. So in order to control that, we're going to need signaling molecules, hormones, that are going to tell our body when there's too much or too little glucose in our blood. So to regulate that, we will use a feedback loop. So let's take a look at what this feedback loop looks like, okay? Let's say I stopped at McDonald's on the way home from school, and I got myself quarter pounder with cheese, French fries, and a Coke, okay? All of those things contain a huge amount of sugar. So I'm super hungry, gobble, gobble, gobble. I eat it very quickly. It works through my digestive system. And as my digestive system processes that, it starts moving lots and lots of glucose into my bloodstream. So here, the stimulus, the change, is that I've just eaten and now my glucose levels are getting really high in my blood. So what's going to happen next? So then next, we need to detect that, right? How do I know that there's a high change? Because there are special cells that are in my blood that receive this message, okay? And they receive this message and they say, ooh, hey, we've got really high blood sugar. And they're gonna pass that on to an organ, right? And usually an organ is going to be your control center. So the control center in this case is the pancreas. The pancreas is the organ that decides what to do. And in this case, when our blood sugar is too high, the pancreas is going to release a hormone, and that hormone is called insulin. You may have heard of this. If you have someone who's diabetic in your family, they have trouble producing insulin. So then as a result, they have trouble regulating sugar. Why does the control center want to release insulin? Well, the effect of that, right, the effector, the last piece here, is that by releasing insulin into your blood, it signals cells to take glucose out of the blood and store them, either inside the cells of the body, or if there's a lot of excess sugar, then it's going to store that in the liver. Okay, so our blood sugar went too high. We detected that in the blood. The pancreas told us what to do. The pancreas released insulin, and the insulin tells the cells, take in the sugar. So now as the cells absorb the glucose, the levels in the blood are going to drop back down to normal, and the feedback loop will stop, okay? So once we return our sugar levels in our blood to normal, we don't want to keep producing insulin, right? That would be excess. That would be like once the air conditioner gets your room temperature back to what you want, it just stays on. That's not going to maintain homeostasis. That would make it too cold. In this example, once we hit our normal blood sugar levels, we're going to stop producing insulin, okay? And we're going to wait until we signal that the blood levels are off again. So why are we talking about homeostasis when we're in a unit all about membranes? Well, we maintain a lot of regulation by moving things across a membrane. Look inside your body. There are tons of things that have to be regulated in order to keep you living. You have to regulate your heart rate. You have to regulate your blood pressure, how often your heart pumps. Breathing, right? The moving of oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth across your lung membranes. In your blood, moving back and forth between your cells and the vessels, you've got to maintain levels of minerals like calcium and different ions, maintaining levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide there too, okay? Cell transport is going to be how we maintain these things. So to kick off a unit on cell membranes and cell transport, we want to remember the reason why we have these things. Remember in our cells unit, we learned that the cell membrane controls what moves in and out of the cell. Well, how does it do that? By receiving and sending these messages, right, these signals, telling us when to move molecules in and when to move molecules out. And the style of the cell membrane, the makeup of the cell membrane, will control what size molecules move, how many move, and in what direction they move. Okay? So that's the end of this lecture. If you have any questions, let me know.